Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Book 4 of Plato's Republic, he is going to, near the end, discuss the nature of injustice within the human soul or personality, within the human person. What's going on when we not only do the wrong things, but we choose to do the wrong things. It becomes part of who we are. We become licentious or greedy or engage in certain sorts of actions like arguing with our neighbors more often than we should over stupid things. What's actually going on there? And Plato is not going to provide us with the complete discussion of this. That's deferred until later on in the Republic, in Book 8, in which there's specific discussions of this type and this type and this type. But in general, what he's going to say is that injustice is not just the result of, but is actually constituted by a disharmony within the soul. And this is analogous to a kind of disharmony within a political community in which different occupational classes don't work well with each other and get into conflict and sometimes even faction and civil war with each other. Now, in this section, he brings up a number of different examples of injustice prior to going into what the shape of injustice is. He talks about a good person and the things that they won't do. They're not going to withhold and embezzle a deposit of gold or silver, right? So they're not engaging in a kind of theft or betrayal of their agreements there. They're not going to be faithless in keeping of oaths or other agreements. They're not going to engage in adultery, neglect of parents, neglect of the due service of the gods. And, we could think of all sorts of other things as well. But the point is, every bit of injustice, every kind of doing wrong for Plato can be traced back to this. And it connects with his notion of the tripartite soul. So let's remind ourselves what that means. Plato thinks that just like within the ideal city, there is the function of the guardians. There is analogous to that the highest part of the soul, which is the intellectual or rational part, the logike part, right? The one that has logos, the one that can think things out and make good decisions. And that part is the part that should be ruling. Then there's the spirited part of the soul. Spirited there, of course, translating thumos, which is a difficult Greek term to adequately render into English. It's sometimes translated as the passionate part of the soul, but you don't want to strictly identify it with what we call passion today. And that's a middle part of the soul, the part that gets angry or riled up, the part that helps to defend us against outside threats and injustices, and the part that can also work within us either for or against the other parts of the soul. It's the part that gives us the energy to get things done, you might say. Then we have, and here in this discussion, Plato is going to talk about it in the singular, but it's really in the plural, the appetites, the epithumii in Greek. These are desires for things like eating and drinking and having sex and laying around and looking at Netflix all day. Plato, of course, doesn't talk about Netflix, but that would fit in there as well, I think, because it would be an appetite. And the appetites cannot control themselves. They need the rational and the spirited part to provide them with some sort of guidance, some sort of limits, and to enforce those limits upon them. So what Plato sets out for us is the ideal of a well-oriented, a well-ordered, a well-structured soul, which is really that of a harmony. And he actually does use a musical metaphor here. He talks about having first attained to self-mastery and beautiful order within himself, and having harmonized these three parts or principles, the notes or intervals of three terms, quite literally the lowest, the highest, and the mean, and all others there may be between them, and having linked and bound all three together, and made of himself a unity, one person instead of many, self-controlled and in unison. This is the way that Plato depicts justice within the soul. So, how should we then understand acting unjustly or engaging in injustice, producing injustice, and even worse, being unjust? So here there's a lot of interesting metaphors, and again, these can be analogized to the big city and then brought back to the individual soul. Plato talks about there being a civil war of the three parts against each other. And in terms of the city, this is fairly easy to understand. Again, you might want to look at Book 8, where there's more specific discussion about how this takes place, how the different groups within the society find themselves at odds with each other and conflict with each other. In terms of the individual soul, what happens is the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive parts of the soul do not get on the same page and are not able to harmoniously work together, each of them doing their proper function. And so we have this breakdown into civil war or faction. You might say that it ties in with each of them attempting to do what is not its function, or to make the other parts serve them in ways that they shouldn't. Now notice that Plato is not saying, well, each part is like its own little thing by itself, compartmentalized off, and none of them should actually tell the other what to do. As a matter of fact, when the soul's working rightly, as we said, the rational part tells everybody what to do, the spirited part enforces it, and the appetites do what they do within the limits set out by that. So it's not as if it's anarchy, right, or compartmentalization. Instead, it's supposed to be this way of ruling, but there's all sorts of ways in which this can go wrong. So the spirited part of the soul could be driving the person and subordinating the rational part to its desires for honor, social status. The appetites could make it the soul sort of conform to the Humean notion that reason is and can only ever be the slave of the passions. As a matter of fact, there's room for the Humean viewpoint. It's just that the Humean viewpoint, from a Platonic standpoint, is going to be engaged in injustice within the soul, right? And even the rational part could go wrong in certain ways, although Plato doesn't talk that much about that. He uses other language that I think is worth dwelling on and considering because it helps us figure out what's going on here. They meddle with each other. They look over each other's work and say, hey, you should be doing things this way, right? And they're not supposed to be doing that, other than the rational part looking over them. They interfere with each other. They get in the way of each other. They hinder each other so that they don't do their proper function. Here's where we could think of an example. What if the rational part actually had wrong-headed ideas, very ascetic ideas, and said, appetites, you shouldn't indulge yourself at all. Not only is sex off the table, intoxicants are off the table, and the food that you eat is going to be the bare minimum to survive on, when there's actually no need to do that. Well, that would be interference, wouldn't it? Revolt. They revolt and they attempt to, place themselves over the others. Reason, could be imperious in some respect. The spirited part could try to take control. The appetites can try to take control. Confusion. Confusing one for the other. Mixing themselves up. This is what happens within a human being. And this produces vices. The vices of foolishness or ignorance, which is opposed to that of wisdom. The vice of cowardice, which is opposed to the vice of courage. The vice of intemperance or self-indulgence, which is opposed to the vice of temperance or moderation. And then finally, the vice itself of injustice, which leads us to doing all these bad behaviors like committing adultery or breaking our agreements with people, or robbing temples is another famous thing. It's sort of like robbing banks in ancient times, because temples were often a place where deposits were made. So the vices then can be understood using this model as a sort of disease. By analogy to virtue being health, health being a proper ordering of the body, disease of the soul, ugliness, shamefulness is another way of translating it, a lack of nobility, a lack of what makes things attractive. That's what vices are. Weaknesses. This is another great way to think about vices. A vice is a bad habit, but it's also a susceptibility to make the wrong decisions based on the attractiveness or the repugnance of things that are largely outside of ourselves. The person whose appetites are in charge and too strong, well, they can be led around by sex or by food or by, intoxication or whatever else it is. They can also be led around by a desire for security or a desire to not have to do work. The person who is being led around by their spirited part, it could be cowardice, right? But it could also be a tendency to be too aggressive with people, to compete within the social arena and bring more honor to oneself than is actually deserved, insisting on reinforcing one's own social status at the expense of others. That's a weakness. So we can go on with this. What do these do? What is the problem with this? Well, they make a person's soul disharmonious. Our souls are already disharmonious, and the goal of, you might say, Platonic virtue ethics is to make us move more and more towards being an actual unity. But we can also go in the other direction, where we feel as if we're at war with ourselves. We can't be the same person from moment to moment. And the result of this is that the life that one's living, even if you picture it to yourself as one that encompasses many things that are understood as goods, some of which may be genuine goods, some of which may be apparent goods, one's life is not good. As Plato says through Socrates, one's life is not worth living. The life of the person who is addicted to fame is not really worth living, even if they do manage to become famous for a while. The life of the greedy person, the life of the person who is always, giving in to fear is not really a fully human life, and therefore is not a good life. So what we've got here is a depiction of how injustice works within the soul and how it's connected to these different parts of the soul in Plato's tripartite psychology, engaging in overreaching and engaging in faction or civil war.